Hey guys, Justin here. So I'm going to be going to the AMC in Rockaway, New Jersey to go see the next MCU movie, Spider-Man Brand New Day. This is the 38th movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and serves as a sequel to No Way Home. This movie is directed by Destin Daniel Cretton and stars Tom Holland, Zendaya, Sadie Sink, Jacob Batalon, John Bernthal, Tremel Tillman, Michael Mando, and Mark Ruffalo. So something different that I wanted to do for this video and all other recap and review videos going forward is some pre-show thoughts. This was seen in the marketing a little bit, but the cinematography and the tone of the story has changed quite drastically compared to the John Watts directed Spider-Man Home trilogy that we got before all of this. Sadie Sink's inclusion in the cast, they didn't announce her character, and she's thought to be Jean Grey from X-Men. We'll have to see if that's true. And a lot of people online have been speculating that, and people are having a hard time keeping their mouths shut about it. In my personal opinion, I kind of like to believe that it's true. It was kind of the same thing with No Way Home, spoiler alert, when all three Spider-Men met, and they were trying to keep that a secret for as long as they could. And especially Andrew Garfield in interviews, he was like, I have no involvement with this. What is this? And this is the first fully live-action Spider-Man movie since No Way Home in 2021. And another interesting fact is that Sony Pictures, the other company that's behind this movie, has produced every single Spider-Man movie since Tobey Maguire in 2002. So they own the live-action film and TV rights for the character, and the rights expire if they don't continuously make projects based on Spider-Man. So the last film before this was Across the Spider-Verse in 2023, and currently Spider-Noir is on Amazon Prime. Set for release in June 2027 is Beyond the Spider-Verse. That's just crazy though. Like, that whole Spider-Verse trilogy just spans a decade. All right, enough of that. Let's go see the movie. So loud. Hey Dad, look, Spider-Man. All right, so the movie's finished. What did you think? Perfect. I told him to do that. Hey, guess what? We outside doing this review. And also, since Spider-Man is from Queens, let's go Mets. 4 years following the events of No Way Home, Peter has isolated himself from Ned and MJ as they went off to MIT. After Doctor Strange's memory wipe, Peter took this time to separate his own life from the duo, while still performing his duties as Spider-Man. He's become an ally of the local offices of the United States Department of Damage Control. During a criminal incident that involved damage control, Peter discovers that an old lady was driving a tank, but she was actually mind-controlled. This mysterious mind-controlled presence keeps following Peter around. So, in order for him to better understand this, Peter visits Yelena Belova, who's residing in Brighton Beach, and from what she's observed, she reaffirms this info of mind control. So, Peter returns to the damage control offices to provide more info on the said person who's doing this stuff. Afterwards, Peter finds Ned in the same bodega as him and follows him down to the apartment complex where MJ and Ned are now residing as they got back from MIT. MJ got into a new relationship during his absence, and Peter is overwhelmed by this, and he goes home to process this. Meanwhile, his mind is being invaded once again, and he gets taken over by this arachnid mutation. Previously, he had been bitten by a spider that is known in the MCU. It hasn't been like overwhelming his senses. So, in an incident with the villain Scorpio being possessed, Spider-Man has his mutation take over, and he becomes dangerous to those around him. The next day, Peter finds Bruce Banner teaching a class at Empire State University and asks how effective inhibitors are and if there's a right science behind them, since he sees Bruce Banner also using one. This mysterious person tries to continue to get into Peter's head and hops around in other people's minds in order to taunt him further. But during this encounter, he discovers a weakness. This person cannot hop any further than 33 feet at a time. Peter fears for MJ's safety during all of this and proceeds to take her far enough away from this situation. At first, Peter is hesitant to trust MJ with the reveal of Doctor Strange's spell, but she kisses him and says that she remembers until the person behind all of this begins to reveal themselves through MJ. MJ is nearly hurt during this encounter. This causes Peter to finally discover that Jean Grey is behind all of this, from the X-Men. Jean Grey carries disdain for the Department of Damage Control and what they did to her sister, so anybody associated with the organization itself has pretty much become an opponent. So Peter takes MJ to Frank Castle, also known as the Punisher's home/boat, in order to keep her as protected as possible while preparing to encounter Jean once again. While at Frank Castle's place, Peter is working on fixing an inhibitor, but during this, Frank grills Peter on hiding behind a metaphorical mask that may do more harm than good. So while at Frank's place, MJ asks Peter about relationships that he's had because she doesn't remember anything from Jean Grey's possession. Later on, Jean makes her way into the damage control office in order to receive answers about her sister's whereabouts. Peter tries to intervene until he discovers that Bruce Banner is under Jean's control. Frank attempts to deal with the Hulk by himself, but Peter tells him to deal with Jean. The Hulk breaks out and almost kills Peter until he realizes that he's actually a friend. Jean possesses Frank in order to get into the vault where the damage control staff is hiding in. Jean gets tranquilized and says the name Sarah before passing out. After this, Peter goes back to Frank's place, and MJ discovers the note that Peter wrote and asks why he didn't reveal himself sooner. He wanted to protect MJ, like mentioned before, but didn't want a repeat of the loss of Aunt May. Peter still loved MJ, but MJ now hardly knows Peter, and she doesn't really feel the same way anymore. Following this, Yelena calls Peter to give info on Sarah Grey, who is actually Jean's sister. Jean Grey wakes up captive in Damage Control's Roosevelt Island facility in order for her to be studied on her abilities. In one experiment, Jean discovers that Sarah was actually killed by Damage Control. Being overwhelmed by this news, she lets her abilities reach much farther than before. Spider-Man then infiltrates the building in order to hopefully reason with Jean before she begins killing anybody. Peter removes his inhibitor, which he put into the back of his neck, in a symbolic acceptance of both his domestic life as Peter Parker and his superhero life as Spider-Man. Peter speaks with Jean, and she tries to mess with him inside his head again, but learns about the loss of Aunt May and May's acceptance of Peter's abilities and the person behind it. Jean becomes vulnerable and befriends him, but Frank accidentally shoots Peter in the altercation, and he's over like a kilometer away, but he has one of those giant scope things. But Jean saves him from death. And while at the hospital, Frank finds himself opening up to Peter in respect of this bravery. And as Peter leaves the hospital, he makes his rounds of visiting Aunt May's grave and his local bodega for flowers. But then he finds that Ned is at this bodega, and he reintroduces himself to him. They do their handshake, and Ned remembers Peter. And that is Spider-Man Brand New Day. So the credit scene, Ned's Spidey tracker picks up in an unknown location, and this sets up his involvement in the next Avengers movies, either Doomsday, Secret Wars, or both. So some interesting surprises that I saw within this movie was Tom Holland's own drink brand called Bureau, which is a non-alcoholic beer. I'm not sponsored, but I do remember hearing about this when Tom Holland was advertising it. The soundtrack for this movie I thought was very unique, especially licensed songs that they wanted to put in the movie and the musical score itself. Florence Pugh as Yelena, I did hear that she was possibly going to be in this, but then I was like, oh, she's actually in it. Sadie Sink as Jean Grey was confirmed. There were multiple shots within this movie that looked very much like straight from a comic book panel. And I thought that was really cool because this Spider-Man movie seemed to be more comfortable with having stylized shots rather than just simply adapting the comic book to reality. I thought it was welcome change. I wonder if Ned's sorcerer magic that was shown in No Way Home had any effect on him remembering who Peter was much faster. Interesting thought. I feel like the dramatic moments within this movie felt a lot more natural to bring up because they kind of put more emphasis in this specific Spider-Man movie that they wanted to focus on Peter's internal struggle between domestic and superhero life. Instead of just being like a lighthearted, goofy comedy like the previous MCU Spider-Mans were. Except for No Way Home, because they started to like make a little bit of a transition there. Oh yeah, Happy Hogan wasn't in this because, of course, he wouldn't remember who Peter is. The Lord of the Rings reference I thought was a pretty funny addition. And Jean Grey inside the Department of Damage Control in Roosevelt Island. I can't let you do that, Bill. That reminded me of Hal from 2001: A Space Odyssey, and when he says, "I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that." And the scene where Peter is injured and Jean is trying to help him out reminds me of the scene between Aunt May and Peter in No Way Home. Two critiques that I do have about this movie is that Mark Ruffalo's Hulk pretty much was just a side character in this movie. His frequency in the marketing seemed a little excessive compared to the amount that he was actually featured in this movie. The stuff about the Avengers kind of seems out of place tonally with this specific story that they were trying to tell. Interestingly enough, in this movie, I did get a sense that they had a theme going, and what I got from that was just because you're different, it doesn't mean you need to feel like isolation is the right choice for you. You just need the right people to understand and accept you. I think that's very important. Going into my own personal life a little bit, sometimes I've happened to isolate myself and it really hasn't done me much good because over the past several years, I've been trying to be more social and find people who are like myself. Sometimes I forget about that, but then I'm reminded you don't need to go through these things alone, especially if you seem to change. And I think that's really nice. But with that being said, I'd like to thank you for watching this video. And if you want to check out more stuff like this, you can follow my recap and review series here on JSheaMedia. If you want to see any other content, subscribe to JSheaMedia. And if you want to keep up with anything else outside of that, you can follow my socials. But with that, thanks for watching.